Good morning, everyone. I want to call this meeting of the Governance Committee to order. I am going to share my screen so that everybody can see what we're discussing today at home. So usually try to do that. So here is the agenda for the meeting. Can everyone see that? And the first item on the agenda is a roll call. Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Here.
Councilor Tabor?
Here.
And Councilor Lombardi is not with us today. Councilor Cook and I am here. And we also have the Deputy City Manager with us today, Suzanne Woodland. Did everyone have a chance to review the minutes from March 11th?
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
No.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, our minutes from March 11th are approved. I'll go back here to our agenda. You'll see that we really only have one item that we're discussing today on the agenda. It's training for city volunteers. We are going to look at a draft training manual first. That will ultimately show up in the packet and be published online when we get closer to approval of that, but today is a first look at the draft training manual. We're going to talk about what training needs we have from looking at that, and those are really defined in a draft City Council policy, the training needs, and see if there are any updates from city staff. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and share the draft training manual, and note that this is very much in draft format. This was borrowed heavily from two other municipalities that we looked at our last meeting, essentially just consolidated some of the language from both of them, took out their individual community language, and noted where we needed to add in links or policies, which are not there yet. So that's why this is in such draft format. So I'll slowly go through this. The introduction is largely similar. If everyone will remember, this is Middletown, Wisconsin, I believe, had this wonderful training manual online, so we borrowed heavily from them. This is very similar to theirs, except I changed just a little bit of the language because they have a slightly different form of government than we do, even though they have a council form of government. Just to reflect what we have in the city. And I think it's important to note that the purpose of the handbook is to define the role and function of each city board, commission, and committee. It doesn't give individuals information about their committee, but it basically tells them this is how committees work, and these are how boards and commissions work. And review the guidelines for those committees. Talk about the history and composition of city organization, and that's where some of the links are going to be important, like links to kind of a diagram of what the city looks like and what kind of the function of city government is, and also provide them with the information necessary to understand their responsibilities as members of those committees. So there's just a basic definition of city administration, and then relationships, and this is to help people understand the relationships their committees have with various entities in the city, the relationship with the city council, and this kind of talks about where their real role is in the relationship with the city council and advising the city council. Also bringing perspective from a grassroots standpoint, from the average citizen's perspective that we don't always get at city council. I think that's also critical here. Then it talks about the relationship with city staff. Again, this is important to note because you don't want committee members thinking that suddenly they need to come in and talk to all the staff all the time and ask tons of questions. You want them to start to understand what that relationship actually is supposed to look like and what the role is as a city staff member. And that is also in conjunction with the relationship with their fellow members of their committee. and relationship with the public. This is something that often our committee members don't think about, is what their relationship is with the public. And we see that in public comment, but oftentimes they don't think about, once they leave the meeting environment, that they still are playing a role for the city, and that people turn to them for information, and they need to be able to provide honest information to the public. And then also with other council bodies, we do have sometimes we have committees that meet together. I used an example here of Conservation Commission, Trees and Greenery Committee, and Recreation Board all being interested in issues around parks, which is something the Governance Committee had talked about a year ago. So, and business relationships and financial interests. And this kind of echoes back to our ethics policies and people being aware of what a conflict is as well. Not having contracts with the city in particular issues where you're making decisions. The appointment process. Now, this is where I have some questions, because we have, I don't know that we follow the same procedure for every committee, board, commission around oath of office and appointment process, but I was interested to find out that some of our new standing committee members did take the oath of office, even though they're not on boards or commissions. So, and it may be that they're on a commission, not on a committee. So it might be boards and commissions take the oath and not committees. So this is something we need to clarify.
Conversation maybe with the clerk's office, and we come here and say, okay, here's the process we would like, even if we have a difference of view. And there are some like old New Hampshire statutes that may have different requirements depending on how you title something, but that doesn't mean if we want to have a more formal process,
We can't.
we could talk about that and institute one, because anything you've created by ordinance, you can add additional process to.
Okay.
I think I can talk to Kelly about that, and we can see what meeting it would make sense, and I can brief her in advance and we can talk about it.
Okay. That sounds great. 'Cause these are things that, everybody does them a little bit differently. And so I had some questions here. It is very basic on the appointment process. We say almost all city advisory bodies are advisory bodies. Some are not. They make clear decisions, like our land use boards, on their own. That's why it says almost there. And then we talk a little bit about training for appointed members. I did have some troubles with formatting. You'll just see I've got like weird lines in here that I'm trying to get rid of still.
Breaks.
And then general guidelines. This is what I thought was very helpful information that our committee members don't always get. Understanding their role and the responsibility of their board, representing the overall public good, keeping communication open, doing your homework and being prepared, familiar with items on the agenda. It's this kind of, I think that most of our volunteers take their roles very seriously and come very well prepared, but I think sometimes we just haven't told them what their expectations are. And they would be happy to fulfill them if they knew what the expectations were. So it's important making sure that they know. Asking questions in advance of your staff liaison or with your committee chair if you have things that you think maybe they don't know, so that way when you're at the committee level you can actually have a discussion around that, not just ask questions and have to have a report back in a month. Be active in your committee and enthusiastic about the work of your committee, and have a good working relationship with your fellow committee members. So I think these are kind of general guidelines. I think, though, the last line's important, that you're acting as an ambassador of the city of Portsmouth in many ways. You're representing us on a board, commission, or committee. So you have to always remember that in the public eye. And at the same time, you're also representing the interests of the citizens. So I know we have electronic communications policies at the staff level here, but we haven't linked that here. And so that's a discussion we need to have around electronic communications, and making sure that maybe everyone should be aware of our general electronic communications policy. Most of our boards, commissions, and committee members do not have city email, so it's not going to impact them in the same way, but it is around right to know law. They are impacted about communications. And I don't know that we have a social media policy. That is linked here because that's something that Middletown had. But it's something that maybe we talk about. Maybe we need some kind of social media policy because so much communication happens there. Even if it's not for city staff, if it's just for volunteers, even. But that would have to be very general guidance, I should note, because you have to be very careful with First Amendment rights, public speech rights. So it's more just guidance for individuals. Adherence to policies of the city, and open records. And this is where we need to absolutely link the RSAs and maybe include language, direct language here, rather than just linking it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then we address meetings, attendance. What is a quorum? This always comes up. What is a quorum?
And it will depend, I just think, seeing that, sometimes the quorum is actually set by the ordinance, and it will be different than a majority.
Okay.
Because I
So-
think we did that possibly for one of the committees, maybe cemetery. I think we.
Maybe.
Anyways,
Okay, so we need to check that quorum, open records. We need to include the RSAs. And what's interesting is that this is language that came from the other town, and they talk about when you don't have a quorum anymore, how you no longer have the ability to make decisions as a body.
Right.
And I don't know if individuals pay attention to that when people leave. So I think that that's also an important thing to flag here, I think. What is the role of the chair? Again, the role of the staff liaison. Now, this is a little bit repetitive, so we need to decide if we want all of this in both places. It might be worthwhile to have a little bit of a repeat. Role of the committee secretary. And I included this here because I serve on several committees that have a secretary that is not a member of the staff. And I think that that's important for our volunteers to know what that role is when they're serving in it. And it's always helpful, too, to include this, and maybe then our committees will start appointing more recording secretaries and taking some of that burden off of staff members.
And I think it's important to note there's different ways to do it. I know in the Blue Ribbon Housing Committee, our secretary, there's a way to turn on transcripts, and then he reads the transcripts and isolates them.
Ah.
So I'm not really sure how that, I know that he's worked with Kevin on getting the Zoom transcripts.
Oh, that's nice. Oh,
He actually uses AI to produce the minutes,
Oh.
or a draft of the minutes, then he goes back.
and make sure that
And then
you're
he
in
edit- yeah.
accord to properly note who made the motion and.
Correct. Yep.
Seconded.
Yep.
Right.
that's interesting. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I'm fortunate. I think the two committees that I have secretaries in, they're both just really good at producing minutes within a few minutes, and they send them out within a few hours of the meeting. They're just seasoned board secretaries, I think. And then there's the role of a council liaison, too. This isn't the case in every committee. I noted here, and I changed some of the language here, that sometimes they're voting, sometimes they're non-voting. When they're a voting member, they're like a full member of the committee, but non-voting council liaison just serves in the liaison role, but they both serve in that liaison role. I think that that's important, too. Here's more information on open meetings. And I think that the more information we provide, the better around this, because this is where I get the most questions from volunteers, is what are the rules? can I send an email? Can I not send an email? Can I talk to certain people? Can I have friends over? I think that it's really important that they know what the rules are very specifically. And then we need to, this is the sexual and other workplace harassment policy from, I misspelled Portsmouth here. I transposed 2 letters. This is a different policy from Middletown. I changed the language so it says City of Portsmouth, but it isn't. So we need to replace that with the City of Portsmouth policy, which we do have a policy, is my understanding. And a workplace violence policy. I don't know if we have that or if it's linked to the
I think
sexual.
it's folded in, but I'll have to, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. Our volunteers must understand that they are, even though they're not technically employees of the city, they are held to the same standards around these issues. So you'll see that's their long policy. And then I did attach the Code of Ethics here. This is, I'm not sure, the most recent version. So I need to go back and double check that. I think this is the most recent of the Code of Ethics, but not necessarily in the conflict of interest section that was updated. This is not the most recent language.
I think that's updated now on the city website.
Is it? Okay.
They have the latest.
Okay. Okay. Some of that is not, I didn't think when I copied it out was accurate. So, and then I know that the municipal official disclosures is not updated. And I only included this because it also applies to some of our appointed boards here.
So it looks like the ethics is, but municipal disclosures is not.
Is not updated yet online. That's one that we adopted late last year. But we need to double check the conflict of interest section. That's the only thing I'm thinking that we might just need to double check and see if that's accurate. But we'll want to include this because it also applies to Planning Board, Zoning Board, and Historic District Commission, and any city employees appointed to land use boards. So that should be included here in the manual as well on the municipal official disclosures. And then I found this great Robert Rules cheat sheet that I thought was helpful, and it's probably all the information that anyone needs around Robert's Rules for
I'm
a
not
committee.
sure the motion to reconsider is correct, though, because the way it is in our city
Yeah.
rules, it has to be somebody who originally was for the motion, who asked for reconsider. It has to
Yes.
be within the same meeting or the next meeting, and it has to be 2/3.
So we should probably update that.
Yeah, Howard gave a
do
really
that.
good, and I can send that over to you,
Okay.
simplified Robert's Rules that he gave to the Housing Committee. So I can forward that over.
Okay.
And we can even just do like a comparison of what that is and what this,
Yeah.
I mean, I think this looks really good, but
It's just very basic. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something that I would have used in student government,
I'll find that and forward it over so that.
But I thought it was important to include something like this because this is one of the things that most of our new committee members if they've never served on a committee or on a board, they don't know.
Yeah, no,
just
it's
some-
really useful.
Yeah. So we can update that accordingly. So what are all of your thoughts on this, and what do we want to tackle? What do we want to do? We want to tackle it in chunks or have individuals tackle pieces of it and then and make sure it's accurate and bring it back and or like how do we want to address it?
Before we get into how to address it, I think it's pretty solid. It's a great start, and I liked particularly how we explained the relationships to fellow members, to staff, and critically to the council, because committees don't have the authority to make decisions for the city,
Right.
and I think a lot of times people think they do. And they're advisory, except in the case of the land use boards.
Yes.
And so I think the relationships are good. I think that section is pretty solid. It would be nice to have a table of organization.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And I think the Middleton one has that.
Okay.
And then I have some thoughts on role of the chair,
Okay.
because I think folks who come from the business world or the military, or they're used to a chairman sort of as an executive.
Ah.
And I found this great quote. The surest road to success as chair is to take the position that the members control the decision, and you were there to help them do it. And somewhere in there, and I can give you that.
It might be that. Is this is it a quote from somebody?
It's a quote from Robert's Rules for Dummies.
Okay. Well, it might be something that we want to include. In the language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my thought, because, a lot of people who get a role of chair aren't used to waiting till everyone else has spoken before they speak and things like that. But if the committee's going to be successful, it's really got to be we made this decision as opposed to we were pushed forward to.
Keep in mind, it might vary on the sophistication of your members in the committee. So I've certainly been in some committees where if the chair did not take a leadership role, a very active role,
Nothing.
the rest of the committee wouldn't know as well how to participate and be
Yep.
as effective. So I think it does a little bit vary on the nature of the committee's work and the participants.
Right.
Sometimes you need a much more active chair.
That's true.
So
That's
this-
true. Who keeps the agenda moving
Yes.
and make sure
that
they
is-
make decisions.
And makes suggestions. And, yeah.
No.
Especially, like you said, sometimes the chair just has more experience, so people sometimes do not know how to make a motion or do not know that they don't need to argue as much. They get their viewpoint can be illustrated in their vote, and then another counter motion can be made. And so I do agree with you that sometimes the chair has to do some
Cemetery
legwork.
committee would be a perfect example
Yes.
Right.
in terms of, here's the update, here's this, here's that, and what does everyone think?
Yeah.
But there's a lot more. Yeah, it works more effectively because there's real leadership with people who are bona fide interested, but the chair happens to have more time and interest to kind of tee things up for consideration.
Right.
So it's a bit more active in that type of role versus maybe other types of role where you're getting lots of public input on maybe controversial issues. So just mindful that we have a diversity of venues.
We do, yes. Sustainability is a really unique one. Well, there's a chair, but the chair doesn't lead the meeting. So they, trade off leading the meeting. But the chair is always there to make comments and usually follows everyone else, which is very interesting. Yeah.
One thing we didn't have in the initial roles is, we talk about how we get citizen knowledge, we get citizen input, but some of our committees, we have expertise. Like the Energy Committee has expertise that's valuable. And I think it's good to have that in writing, because there's, like the police station, we've added a citizen member who has expertise as a civil engineer. It's been very valuable. That's a working group, but it's an example.
Okay.
When we talk about the role of staff liaison, I know we touch on it further down in communications, but does it make sense to touch on it, again, to drive home the repetitive thoughts of that, communication between staff, committee members and staff liaison should go through, or like should include the chair? Because I know that staff often asks that of committee members, and when replying to a committee member, we'll include the chair. But I
a really
think,
good point. Yep.
yes, and I think that we said it, but again,
Yeah.
I know we said it, but again, highlighting that, that it is okay to, through the chair, give questions that you are looking for answers to prior to the meeting.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That,
Right.
and I don't know if, obviously, it's not state statute and not a hard set rule, but I don't know if we could make our own internal policy that says, if you are looking for, I don't know the best way to say it, or like detailed or very complex answers to complex questions, that you should give a lead time to the staff. Because I think sometimes that's where, struggles
Things
happen, is that people
bunch
are
up.
asking very complex questions, and then we're only meeting most boards are only meeting once a month. And so, especially if you have really high octane things going on, I think, I know in housing, we kind of ask people, hey, if you have a question for staff, like, let's get it at least 48 hours before the meeting. Because reminding sometimes committee members that staff have regular things within their roles. And while staff liaison is within their role, they still have day-to-day functions. And so we, instead of being disappointed or feeling that staff is not committed, to helping the committee, I don't know where we would line that up. I don't necessarily think it would be here in the role of staff liaison, but maybe in communications.
Yes.
That we say, it is requested that all questions for staff, that require research.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And I think it's good to have those go through the chair.
Yes. I think,
I've got a committee where I've got very enthusiastic people, and, two of them said, can I make an appointment with our staff liaison at the meeting? And it's like, whoa, we need to funnel these through the chair so that.
yeah. And I also think it's important to, and I think, again, I think we lightly touch on this, but I think it should be, and I guess this is a question of how much of the role of the committee member is to do some of their own due diligence, to not solely, rely on staff to get them 100% across the board. There's tons of resources on our website, and in some of the committees I'm on, I've said, have you looked at the website? Have you looked at former meeting minutes of, you have a question about the planning board? Have you looked at meeting minutes? And then if you have more detailed questions, we can then take that to staff and or through staff or whoever to the chair of that committee.
Right.
So I'm not really sure where we should put that, whether that's in general guidelines or.
Or under, asking questions, maybe we can
Yes.
be more explicit about this
Yeah.
here. And this is the general guidelines, but we give them very clear guidance here. Maybe we can just be more direct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I took some notes here about what you're looking for, and
Yeah. Because this is committee chair or staff liaison.
Yes.
And really, we want it to be committee chair and
staff liaison. Yeah. Okay. All right. That is noted.
And then, we have the do your homework.
And this is combined language, I should note,
Yeah.
from both, because the first one just had little short blurbs, and then the second one I thought had better, a little bit more meaty language about homework and questions.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to include more there, so I think you're right on that.
And maybe it's, as you talked about divvying things up, maybe it makes sense for us to at the end of this, give a couple of examples. Like, say you were on this committee and you had a question. Here are the internal resources that you have accessed before you should talk to staff. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense for staff, but or if that convolutes it. So.
A little
I think it
case
depends
study.
on the
Yeah, like-
committee. Some committees
Yes.
it's gonna be easier to access information.
Of course,
Right.
yeah.
Might be committee specific.
Right, some of us are really terrible about that, like, the governance committee that just has a blurb on the website.
Yeah.
And I need to work on a website for us that has some background information. I haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Or maybe even just in like the blurb about do your homework, there could be a line about a remind, like it says,
Committee chair could probably direct
yes,
folks to resources that might be on the website or,
archived minutes and,
yeah, that might be a baby step.
So-
and then that last line, I think we should definitely write, feel free through the committee chair to seek.
The
again.
staff's advice, right? Right, because you don't want, especially if you have a committee of 15 people, every single one of them individually reaching out to the staff liaison is a lot to take on.
Yeah, it's the same as council. Yes. Here's a group is.
Right.
It's a lot, yeah. That's right. Okay, so I will update that language and bring it back. And I have this in Word and PDF. I think we sent PDF just so it didn't, the formatting didn't change, but we have it in a Word format, and I'm happy to have, I guess it's Cynthia's this week, send it out to everyone in that format, if you want to work on specific language. Is there anything else that you noticed that you want to highlight that we need to consider changing?
No, I just, for me, obviously the things that are highlighted that legal has to go through, just leave those open holes that I'm sure will get filled instead of asking.
Yeah, it was all budget all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Again. So,
Sorry.
by the end of this week, it'll clear up.
Okay.
Yeah, Susan was dealing with other stuff, so it was, we just did not have the bandwidth to look at this, but we are happy to look at this.
Well-
I may wait, though, until you put these good comments in.
And, yeah.
And then Susan and I can take a fresh look, and I'd also suggest, since there are creative people in the city, is maybe we add a little more white space, occasional picture or image, something that might encourage the turning of the page to actually make their way through the document. Sometimes we are mindful that in this day and age, fewer words are more likely to be read than many words, and sometimes there's a way to kind of tighten it up or freshen it a little bit in ways that might help, because there's a lot of good information in here, and I
Yeah.
to the extent we can just tweak a little of the formatting and a little the layout, it might help us get that message across, along with some video content that people could click on and get some pieces that way too.
I can put a table of contents at the front if
Yeah, that's
everyone
a good
thinks
idea.
that would be helpful here at the
Yeah,
top of the
Cynthia
first
could do that.
page. Yeah, we can put a little table before the intro, and then,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Or-
a great idea.
Does it make sense to have a little verification that a new committee member gets this and then gets a sheet that says, I've read this, and initials it?
So what we have talked about is using the city's new software.
Yes, I was gonna say online.
To be able to push this out to committee members. So if you are onboarded as a committee member, this is part of what would happen, and we would push out this handbook policy, and you would get an email, and you click on it, and it's actually really easy. And it lays out well on your screen, and click your electronic signature, and you are who you say you are, and it's that easy. And you can print a copy if you want a printed copy, but you don't have to print a copy. And then we have a record of it. And we've pushed out a whole bunch of policies that we've had in place, but now it's a way to kind of use the system to really better track electronically who's read it. Credit card policies. If you've got
Right.
city credit card,
Right.
we know, who's pushing military leave, our tuition reimbursement, We're just slowly beginning to upload all of our policies and have a central place. But I've been advised we can turn it outward too and send out as well.
Okay. Is it something that we can, so with this document, I think it would make sense to divide it up if we do a push for this document, where you can print the whole thing, but you go through it in segments, because it'll be easier chunks for people to take in and know that they read every single segment. I do worry that if we push out the whole thing and say, read this, that they'll read the first page and then it'll check off that they read it.
Yep.
Whereas if you do it like, here's the introduction, here's what city administration looks like, and here's relationships, here,
Yep, I think that's maybe a conversation I could bring. I can ask the question of Kelly Harper, the Human Resources Director, who's been kind of spearheading this and is very familiar with it. Let me pose that question, and if she feels it would be more useful for her to come here and talk to the committee about options for deployment. But let me see what the response is, so I'll ask her about that.
Okay. And I also was going to ask, while I'm on the subject of HR, there's some policies that some of our committee members probably need to abide by that aren't obvious, like any child safety policies for our rec board, like our rec board members, if they're participating in activities with children representing the city. Like, so do we, oh, by the way, you guys should all be aware of our child safety procedures and policies. And
I will have to talk to Todd, because I know they have, obviously processes for their staff and their volunteers.
Right.
But if a rec board is not volunteering,
Exactly.
and is just appearing there like any other member of the public, like any parent that shows up to pick up,
that's fine.
then, they would be just treated like a member of the public, but they'd have no responsibility, right?
Right.
So let me see what he's been doing, and
Okay.
I'll try and get some feedback on that.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking if they show up and they're volunteering, and what if they don't know the policy?
Yeah.
So we might have some individual policies that are HR policies that apply to volunteers on a as needed basis.
We got a lot of policies in different
Right.
places, which is why the delight that we're having with the new software, because then we can better track them all.
It's kind of like when the city council decided to assist in serving food, and needing to know what our food service policies were.
Right.
So that's really, are there any other reflections before we move on? Okay. And do we want to, I
Thanks
will.
for all the work.
It was changing, like literally reviewing and going, oh, this needs to be City of Portsmouth here.
Yep.
And instead of saying Common Council, needs to say City Council, like things like that. And then double checking that the policies made sense. I will work with the legal department to get these policies that we've discussed, the appropriate policy in here, and the RSAs in here. If there's any particular, I think that most of the language is pretty good. I've taken notes from both of you. And I will make sure that we send out a little note to Vince and see if he had anything that he wants to incorporate before our next meeting. And then, so I can put in the information you've given me, maybe in Redline, and have you
Quote
review
about
it.
that, Chairman.
Thank you.
And read my handwriting.
Man,
Should have been a doctor.
it's pretty good. It's better than the doctor I'm married to right now. So we'll replace these policies and make sure that the ordinances are accurate that are back here at the back. And if somebody could send me, the system
I'll
mayor.
send
can
you
me-
the simplified Roberts rules that we have.
Okay, I can do a cross comparison. I'm happy to do that. With that said, the next item on the agenda is outlining training needs. And the reason that's here is that we talked about having potentially a city council policy around volunteer training. And I want that to reflect the training documents that we have and what the staff's expectations are for volunteers as well. But part of that is really scope and what is required in training. So this is a general training policy that I took from, I borrowed a little bit from a community in Canada that had a training policy, and then I made it very, very simple because theirs was 15 pages and talked all about the structure of their committees. But I thought that this was the key to what we needed. And then it had a quick legal review, but I'm sure that there's going to be more. There's going to be more, I'm sure, comments. So
Can
I would love to hear
ask?
thoughts. Yeah.
So when you use the word training, are you anticipating that there will be an in-person, being from either the legal department or someone else with the requisite experience showing up at each board and commission, or this manual is kind of like, and the video hopefully that Susan or Trevor will do with a little kind of right to know, is that your vision? And then the legal department just deploy as maybe requested, say, by the chair or some other committee member because of some issue. Or I just want to make sure I kind of see or hear what you're thinking.
I know my thoughts, but I want to hear from you guys.
I think that I would not see the need to be in person. I do think it is, I will just say, given like the Blue Ribbon Housing Committee, which is one of like the newer committees that we have set up, it's nice to have legal come in day one.
Yep.
Right.
So maybe it is, I know that this is a lot, but maybe it is the once a year legal comes in and just says like, hey, reminder, here is the packet. The problem is that our committees don't always turn over. So I think definitely the first meeting of any new standing committee.
I like that. Okay.
And then,
Clarify that.
yeah, and then maybe it is every 2 years. You know what I mean? Or on a roll.
As needed.
Yeah, on a per chair request or rolling basis, that it's just legal touches. Hi, just a reminder, here's the right to know, here's X, Y, and Z. And as a reminder, you guys all, when you were appointed, got a copy of this handbook and make sure that you were using the handbook.
The beauty is with the new system we have is that you can re-push out stuff and send
Yeah.
notices and reminders and updates. So that's, in fact, one of the reasons why we want it. It's like, oh yeah, it's time to review the policy and make sure it, does it need to be updated, and then re-push it. But we can re-push, at the beginning of, say, every council term, or, the beginning of every calendar, or maybe it's every June, kind of depends. Well, as we kind of have this conversation. But that is the value of the software we have, is that we can re-push these.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. It's good to have in-person, and the Housing Committee, for right to know, because the Housing Committee, it took 7 or 8 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah,
But-
so definitely the onboarding of a new committee.
Yeah.
But it's,
That makes a lot of sense.
for people who've been on a nonprofit board or a corporate board,
They want it
it's
pretty
so different to have to do everything in public and understand that.
I tend to agree as well. I think that it's the first committee meeting, so I've watched 2 committees be stood up, and And in both cases, people had lots of questions around specifically the right to know. And one committee brought someone in to talk a little bit about that. The other committee hasn't done that yet, but they just appointed chairs. And it was going to be a suggestion I made that they have legal come in and say a few things. But I also wonder if once a year, if the city could offer a general training for all new committee members, committee boards and commission members who need that in-person education, because some people just don't learn well from reading
I
a
agree.
manual.
That's
Yeah.
why I'm kind of asking, I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure this out in my own mind.
Instead of like going into individual committees, offering a training session, and anybody who's new can come, or anybody who wants a refresher.
Little refresher, Q&A.
Yeah.
Right.
So we think just once a year.
I don't want to overburden the legal department on this, or HR or whoever conducts this, but it would be nice, maybe it's end of January or early February, when you
Most
have,
people are getting stood up or reappointed.
Yeah. Is that, I guess, obviously we know with, on some committees and some boards with new elections, the election cycle, but do we find that that is on average when people are being, because I feel like it migrates throughout the year.
It does. It does. I mean, because we've tried hard to stagger. So that
Yes,
we don't.
which is great.
Yeah.
Let me ask Kelly,
Yeah.
the city clerk, if she has any sense of when that flow is. And, you know, I think if it became routine,
Yeah.
say someone from the legal department to do it, like they had the standard, here's the agenda, and then it's plenty of room for Q&A.
Yep.
Maybe it's March and October.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Something like that. Like we know it's one evening, it'll probably take half an hour because
Yeah.
there'll be 10 minutes of quick summary and then
Just
some
questions.
20 minutes of Q&A, because often that's the best way you tease out the nuances.
Yes, and I think that will be able to, I think that if we could, and I know this is potentially asking a lot as we are working through this, if we could look to potentially stand that up in the fall of this year, then I think it gives us enough time where we've spent a few months working on this, we've rolled it out, and then we have our first Q&A, you know what I mean, 4 or 5 months later, and that I think will help us figure out, okay, well, what are we missing in the handbook? What is overly embellished in the handbook?
Right.
You know what I mean? So that way it's not 2 years down the road where, you know, we've thought this handbook has been effective and then we find out,
Right.
no, it really hasn't. Yeah.
But that's a good pace.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
good timeline.
Roughly every 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. It's going to be 45 minutes, an hour of, and maybe, you know, I think in March, depending, like you said, with new land use members and X, Y, and Z, the roll on, if it's an election cycle, we may have more, and then in October, we may have less, and then,
and we might have people who are applying and are interested in coming, because these are open public meetings.
yes.
So,
I was going to say that.
so they put in an application, they haven't been appointed yet, but they want to know exactly what their responsibilities are.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that may be something that we, in the onboarding, when people even apply, again, pretty
talked
easy.
about that,
Yeah,
yeah.
plug and box, like, are you willing to attend one of these trainings?
Yep.
Yeah. And to me, this is in addition to, of course, reading and checking all their,
Yes.
reading the manual, checking off
Doing
their
their own due
videos or whatever they
diligence.
need to do, and signing a form saying, I've read and understand.
Yeah, I'm wondering, it'll be interesting. I'll talk to HR because I'm wondering, sometimes you can like initial each page, you know how you do that on
Yep.
some of your legal documents?
All of them.
Maybe could be that, and that kind of make sure that full click-through happens. So I'll find out what the options are.
Okay.
Yeah, because that makes it so that if they go to submit, it's like, you have not clicked this, this, and this. So it's a good way to see if people just scrolled to the bottom.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter what we do, we can never control people doing their own due diligence and doing what they are supposed to do. But again, to be able to, you know, without us having to knock on the door and remind them, the system being able to say, hey, you didn't do this.
Exactly. Exactly. You'll notice when you're looking at this policy too, essentially, so I think we've answered one of the questions, but this is like very general references to what the training needs to be, because I don't want to be in a situation where we have to change the policy repeatedly, but I want your thoughts on, are we missing anything? Should something else be here that maybe we're missing? Or is this too much? Do we consolidate some?
I mean, I don't think it's too much. I think, again, my opinion is that until we have it into active play, we'll not know if it's,
You have to test drive it, see what happens.
yeah, it's the reality.
I think
I
that
think it's all material that we have support for. So,
that's what I was thinking. I think we've covered most of these things. There will be some of these things that are answered not in reading the manual, but in talking to the chair. Like, hey, who is our staff liaison, and what does our committee ordinance look like? Specifically, and that'll be important for people to know.
Which I know Monty has been working on as he can find bandwidth to update the committee and commission pages with more information, with updated missions. It's a question of, he's one person, and if you've probably noticed, we've been churning out a lot of public information lately, all types.
A lot.
Been great.
He's been working on budget all the time.
He's been.
So,
I'll put in a little plug here for Monty. He's done a fantastic job updating the Public Art Review Committee's page and keeping all of their information very public, since they're going through a process right now for,
oh, that's it.
yeah, it's really good. So if everyone's happy with this, then I can ask legal to do a more thorough review and make sure that this is something that we're comfortable with from a legal perspective.
We'll get it into form too.
Yes. This was just, I literally took like I usually do, policy and copied the format that we've used in the past, but there might be a better format here from a legal perspective. So be happy to change that. So one of the things that I felt was important to include in this policy was the city's coordination of the training. That we're really clear that the city is going to be providing that training and coordinating it, that it's not something that we anticipate chairs are going to do, or that we want somebody to go outside necessarily and do the organization. Not that they can't get training outside, but that it's critical that that this is consistent.
Our norms,
Yes.
our interpretations,
Yeah. So, all right. So if there are no other questions on this one, if you have any comments or questions, if something comes up, please send it into legal department with the flag, so that they can change this prior to our next meeting with any changes that come from them. And are there any other updates that we should be aware of, or
No, we've now covered them all in the course of the conversation.
Awesome.
So,
I don't know if there's anyone on Zoom for public comment. I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I didn't see anyone.
Nope. It's just us.
Okay. In that case, if there are no announcements, I think our next meeting here, I'll try to stop share if I can. Did that stop? There. I have our next governance committee meeting currently scheduled on the 29th of April at 11 in the morning.
Yes, I am out of town, but feel free to keep that.
Okay. And you should all know that I will have everything completed by the end of next week for that meeting. So at least that's my goal, because I am away the week prior. So
That's perfect, because then legal would have a week
Yes.
give
Yeah.
you any feedback for when you come back and be teed up.
Sounds great. So if anybody has any, anything that they want to contribute on that, let me know by, say, next Wednesday or Thursday, if they want anything on the agenda for the next meeting, because I'm happy to do that. I just, I will be away for spring break.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somewhere fun, I hope.
Yes.
I'll be in Key West.
Oh, well, that's fun too. So with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned.